Good day, everybody. For many of you, you know the story, but for those of you that are new, the Breakfast Club is nearing our 20th anniversary. We were founded following the 9/11 tragedy. The intent on developing the group was to help those that had lost their jobs and were displaced from employment from the tragedy. And then over the years, the group has continued because of all the different challenges that arose. We had multiple crises around the financial status of the country, the economy, then on to the pandemic most recently. Within that, we've gone through several periods of really how we help people. The first, I'd say, phase that we went through was really looking at the job search process, and we really quickly determined that there were several shortfalls. So, people that were uh, managers and looking to fill positions, had to work through HR. They only spent a very limited time looking at the resumes. A lot of times the managers weren't even prepared for the interviews. The people would come in and it was basically much of it fate as to whether the individual was adequately assessed for the opportunity they were being interviewed for and whether or not they would get a offer. So what we tried to do is break that down. We looked at, the job descriptions, how to take the job description, turn it into a T letter where you were addressing those items that were the main focus of what the managers needed, and then looking at the other side, a great way to represent how you met all the requirements for the job. And that type of approach helped out in numerous ways as far as being able to clearly demonstrate how you were a match, which led to a higher percentage of being selected for interviews. And the document also could be used during the interview in order to provide to the manager right at the time you're being interviewed so that you could talk about how you're a match. And even after it, if there was a closeness in how you performed versus some of the other people competing for the job, that document gave the person everything they need to justify why they selected you over the other candidates. And then after we worked through different things like that, how to do your resume, at the same time in the industry, it changed around social media and different digital technologies coming into play. So over the year, the Breakfast Club had adapted. We created initially a Yahoo group to be our principal communication mode. Now it's groups.io. Then we added things like LinkedIn when LinkedIn became prevalent, and then how to really use your LinkedIn profile in order to optimize your job search. And then we've added things like meetup.com so everyone could know when the meetings were and to be able to communicate better across the membership and to follow up with people after the meetings. Um, we have Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, and they're all branded consistently, The Breakfast Club and J.com. So there's a lot of different tools here to help you. And really what it's all about is being able to identify who works at that company that you're targeting, getting a better understanding of the culture, how the organizational levels work. Because when you go into one company, VP may be the higher title. When you go into the next company, it could be a different structure where managing director is the higher title. So by knowing those little nuances of what the titles are, how things are organized, it helps you be able to target the target company more appropriately. One thing that I wanted to add this morning that I feel that many in job search right now are missing out on is, we all hear every day about the gig economy and what's going on with these new jobs. We see it all around us. You have Instacart, you have Uber, you have all of those different services now, which are basically a marketplace where on one side you have consumers like yourself that have needs, and on the other side you have people willing to help out and work with things like Grubhub, or give you a ride or bring you your groceries, and you make money off that. They make money off of it, and you have the convenience. Well, that is only the tip of the iceberg of what these gig talent platforms provide. They have now matured where they actually have a lot of consulting, a lot of professional engagement as well. And the forecast is by 2025 that over $5 trillion a year will be earned by individuals working through the gig platforms. I don't know if any of you have ever heard, but there was one that was put together last year during the pandemic from a number of very large companies that came together. It was quarterbacked by Accenture, and it's called the People Plus Work Connect. So that's people, and then the addition sign, Work Connect. And if you go out and you query there and you see the jobs that they have available and the volume of people that have been placed with organizations through that, it's really a tremendous success story. So, this platform is active. It's live right now. It was put together primarily by Accenture, Verizon, and Procore, working in unison. But many, many other firms and opportunities have connected now via this platform. And it's time to look at different sources like this versus the traditional employment and engagement channel, and see if you can find your next opportunity through this vehicle. So I strongly suggest that you start doing that. I'm also seeing employers starting to actually either join and leverage several of the general gig platforms like Fiverr, Upwork, Catalent, and many others that are out there. So, those are also very rich in the opportunities that are available. So I hope that, you'll open up your minds and start to look at some of these other alternative approaches to gaining employment. And the head of the SIA, which is the Staffing Industry and Associates, it was very interesting. He did a keynote speech a week ago, and he actually said that he feels, in his estimation, that anybody that wants to work, that if they engage on these gig platforms, they should be able to have an opportunity very quickly. And he said, there may be underemployment or not full employment, but he said at least there won't be unemployment. So I definitely prompt each of you, if you are in search, to go out and start looking at these gig platforms and then getting yourself registered on them and starting to go through the alternatives and the connections that they offer to these employers that are seeking, workers. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to David Shuckman. David and Jerry Payton are on the line. They both lead our presentation committee. And with that, they seek out presenters and great topics each month for our meetings. And I'm sure that you're going to enjoy today's program. Go ahead, David.
Actually, let's turn the meeting over to Jerry, because Jerry will have the information to introduce Ed. So thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. We have an excellent presentation and presenter for you today, and let me introduce him right now. Ed Hahn is a recruiter and job seeker ally with a passion for networking and helping professionals return to the workforce. As a veteran of several industries, including publishing, financial services, and software, Ed has a keen understanding of and appreciation for the skills and traits valued in a wide range of environments, regulated and otherwise. Ed has been a corporate recruiter at Cenlar FSB since December 2019 and has been a LinkedIn user since 2008 and a LinkedIn trainer for a dozen years. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ed Hahn.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope you're all doing well today. Very excited to be back at Breakfast Club. It's been a while. So this morning, as you can see from the slide, because you're intelligent human beings capable of reading, I want to talk with you about LinkedIn, how recruiters actually make use of it. So this is a vantage point that very few people get to see who are not recruiters. But I want to walk you through it because I want you to understand how best to attract our attention. Okay, I mean, if you're in this meeting this morning, you are here, you got up, you sat in front, you're logged in. If we were still doing this in person, you would have driven out to the site, to the conference center, and we would be talking in person. Obviously, we're not doing that now, but you made the effort. You want to know, how can I do this better, right? That's why we're all here, and that's what I'm here to help you with. So why don't we move into it, shall we? So why am I the one flapping my gums? This is why, right here. I don't feel a real need to tell you what you can read perfectly well faster than I can say it. All right, so let's start with some statistics about LinkedIn, shall we? So 774 million users globally. That's a jaw-dropping number, right? 750 million. That's a lot of people. Profile pictures are very important, as you can see why. Skill endorsements, we're going to talk about that a little bit. And the network size of the average user. People are always asking about this. I figured I would preemptively tell you this because it tends to come up. All right. First of all, like every website or platform out there, LinkedIn wants you to register using an email address. This is very simple. It's a very low barrier to entry, right? We all have however many we have. I personally am managing, I think, 4. I can't begin to imagine how many emails someone like David has, because I'm sure it's a lot. So please note that as many of us have learned during the Great Recession, as many of us relearned perhaps in April of last year, you always want to use the primary email address that you always have access to. So for IT professionals, if you have your own domain, obviously that's going to be the one you want. If you are a business owner, that's the one you want to use. For the majority of us, though, it's going to be free webmail. You don't want it to be employer provided. You don't want it to be dependent on your ISP. What if your ISP has problems, right? What if you move and your ISP is no longer available in the new location? This has happened to a lot of people. I would encourage you to please give some careful thought to what your primary email address is on LinkedIn. And yes, there's a reason why I'm talking about this really fundamental thing, promise. Okay, I want to talk briefly about this. There is a lot of confusion, I think, about who recruiters work for, what kinds of recruiters there are. Broadly speaking, we can really be grouped into 2 camps: the external recruiters, also known as agency or headhunters, and a lot of less flattering names that I've been called over the years. It's a business. Their business model is that you are the product, and they make commissions if the customer, the employer, the end employer, decides that, yeah, you're the person they want. Now, this is true whether or not you're working on a contingent project, so a defined or limited duration period employment, or if you are a direct hire placement. They still get commissions either way. For corporate recruiters, internal recruiters, HR recruiters, people like me, we are employees of the hiring organization, very straightforward. You know, in a factory job, you produce X many widgets. In corporate recruiting, you have X many recs. You want to work them, fill them, and move on to the next ones that come up. But this is the essential thing that I really want to make sure everyone understands this morning. None of us work for you. We work for the hiring managers, either directly, in that they're my internal stakeholder as a corporate recruiter, or in that they are the ones with making a purchasing decision in the case of external recruiters. This is absolutely essential. Okay, I now want to talk about this, the LinkedIn InMail. So many of you may have received one or more InMails. This is a message that arrives in your LinkedIn message box. It is usually not from someone with whom you're connected. It's usually quite often a stranger, actually. But when this happens, it also sends an email, sends this message to your primary email address, which is the other reason you do not want to use an employer-provided email. Because if I'm hitting you up about a prospective job, and you're currently employed, it's a little awkward to try to explain that to somebody, isn't it? Don't do that. Don't put yourself in that position. Okay. I want to talk first about the kinds of accounts that various kinds of recruiters will use. It doesn't really matter whether you're agency or internal recruiter, because the type of account used by recruiters is really based on what resources their employer provides to them in order to do the job. That's really what it comes down to. So LinkedIn Basic, we all know what that is. It's the one that we all started out with, right? There's also LinkedIn Recruiter Lite, and then LinkedIn Recruiter. Now, despite the similarity in the names of LinkedIn Recruiter Lite and LinkedIn Recruiter, they are exceedingly different products. One sec. I want to respond to this question from Sam.
Yep, I was just going to say there's a question.
Yep. Sam, that's a fabulous question. There are pros and cons to the LinkedIn premium account that has a fee of $25 a month. That's the job seeker. I believe the job seeker or career package that you're speaking of, Sam. There's a spectrum of thought on the ROI for these accounts. You will have heard many different things from the various speakers and meetings that you attend. My opinion is that the ROI on this account is not really good. My reason for saying that is that yes, there is LinkedIn training that can be really powerful. Absolutely true. Yes, you can get around the limit on how many searches you can conduct in a month. This is also true. And yes, you get a couple of InMails every month. All of these things, absolutely true. But as a job seeker, number one, you don't need the InMails. It's not that hard to find out what someone's work email address is. If you just go to your favorite search engine and type email format for, and then whatever the name of the employer is, you're going to get it. Except for your very large enterprises that have tens of thousands of employees, not that difficult to discern, okay? And especially for your small, medium-sized firms, it's again not going to be that difficult. It's almost always first name dot surname or first initial surname. We all know that. Just go to the website, you'll see what the part after the @ symbol is. It takes a very special kind of person to exhaust the cap on searches on a basic account. It's possible. I've known 2 people in all of my networking over the last 2.5 years that they implemented that cap, who've hit it. And we're talking like hundreds of people here. It's possible. It just is not very probable in most cases. LinkedIn Learning. I think the jury's still out from what I can determine among hiring professionals on what the value of those courses is. Again, this is my opinion. I want to be very clear, this is opinion, okay? But those are my reasons for holding it. Thank you, Sam. Good question. All right, let's talk about why recruiters sometimes will use LinkedIn Basic. Because they can't get it funded. They can't get the alternatives funded. If memory serves, the Recruiter Lite begins at $80 a month per person. And the odds are good you don't have just the one recruiter in your firm. So, you know, kind of expensive. So I'm talking about the primary contact vector, invitations to connect, maybe messaging you on social media, right? So for example, maybe if you're on Instagram or Twitter, they might send you a message that way. So that's absolutely a venue. They might comment if you posted something on something that you post on LinkedIn. But the surest way to know is that they just don't have that premium badge, that gold IN. That's the telltale sign that someone is working for an employer that is not providing them as many resources they could really use. Now, I've recruited in such firms before. Not the easiest thing in the universe, but it's possible. Just really challenging sometimes. And you got to be real creative. Okay. I described Recruiter Lite as souped up professional. And that's really what it is. It is just more InMails. That's all it is. I want to say it's something like 30 or so, but that's all it means. Let's see.
Ed, there's a question, and you have the
Yes.
gold badge there. Is the gold in only used for recruiters? A premium badge.
That is a really, really astute question, Valerie, and thank you for asking it. My experience has been that, you know, I'm partly colorblind, so I actually haven't noticed, really. So it might be that that's the case. As I think about it, I believe I have noticed this trend. I don't believe I've seen salespeople, for example, rocking the gold IN badge. Very astute question. Thank you, Valerie. And David, I want to speak to your observation from CIO. That is for Recruiter Lite. That is not for full recruiter. Okay, because let's talk about LinkedIn Recruiter. So LinkedIn Recruiter is the most powerful tool available from LinkedIn, period. People can talk about Sales Navigator. They can only talk about Sales Navigator because they've never seen LinkedIn Recruiter. It gives you an entirely different platform. Now, that's just the basics. Let's talk now about, well, let's talk about some more basics before we get into it. Okay, so on your LinkedIn profile, you can have varying levels of completeness. The highest level is all-star status. And yes, all-star profiles do appear higher in search results. I know that if you're in this meeting this morning, the odds are good that you may not necessarily have a current position. So this is what you can do with it. You can call it consulting, you can call it personal sabbatical. Maybe you're a caregiver. Absolutely have been talking with a lot of people in the last 18 months for whom this is the case. Actually, been talking to a lot of people in the last 4 or 5 years for whom this is the case. That's what you call it. But make sure you actually have a current position, because it will stop you from having an all-star profile. I want to talk about your LinkedIn profile elements. So the headline I really, one of the things that LinkedIn finds really important is for everyone to have a headline. And you have surely noticed that when you start a new job, it prompts you, hey, would you like to update your headline to match the new position? Seems harmless. It's not. And here's the problem. There are, for example, many, many project managers out there. There are many, many project managers that say J&J. So if you accept the proposed headline that LinkedIn suggests, which is job title at employer, you have utterly failed to stand out. You have, in fact, done what my buddy Kevin Lang likes to refer to as engage in personal branding. Please don't let that happen to yourself. Okay? All right. I want to talk about your about section and the importance of it being keyword rich. Listen, it's absolutely critical that you have the keywords that are most relevant for your position, for the work you've done, for the work you are seeking. Because that's what recruiters search by. We don't look by job titles. I'm going to get into why that isn't actually meaningful for us in a little bit. But also talk about your experience, the practices, process, technologies. Again, that's all about keywords. Developers or other IT people, talk about your technologies, what you work in. If you're a MuleSoft person, talk about MuleSoft. In fact, it's really essential that you talk about MuleSoft because those positions are hiring like mad. But there's a very specific reason why I'm talking about some really basic LinkedIn profile stuff here. Because of the way the job description is written.
There's a question from Alex.
Yep, I'm reading it right as I pause for break here. Yep. Alex, that is an absolutely fabulous question. I'm so glad that you asked it. Thank you. So, one minute. Okay.
We should just read the question out loud in case others are not seeing it.
Yeah. If you haven't missed it, or Alex's question was, what is more important, having your tagline keyword rich or being attractive to the reader and catchy? And that is such a great question. I think that it's critical to understand that as I have been informed, words in the headline are weighted the most heavily of any part of your entire profile, period. Most heavily. This is not to say it's the only thing that matters at all, because the next thing that follows that, of course, is the about section. But you have a lot more room in the about section, as we all know. What is it, like 2,800 characters, I think it is. So I would argue, though, that you're not going to stuff every keyword that you need in the headline. You only have 220 characters there. I would say that you want to walk the line between having the most relevant keywords as well as being attractive to the human reader. So go for both SEO and human appeal, which I know sounds like I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too, but I don't think this is an either or proposition, Alex. Really great question, though. Thank you. Ken, thank you for adding that piece about the mobile and for the headline. That is excellent. Yeah, 800 characters are what always will show, especially on the app. Depending on on your word choices and obviously the screen that we're talking about, that can vary. But especially on the app, that's really important. So make sure you front load the value proposition to the reader in those first 80 to 100 characters. Jim, I see your question. For a current position, what do you do if you have just spent 15 months or longer even looking for a job? So you can call yourself a consultant. You can call it a personal sabbatical. What you do not want to do, in my opinion, is say that I have been looking for a job. I don't think that there is still a stigma associated with this. And it's unfortunate and it sucks, but it's also true. And the fact that it's not attractive doesn't make it any less true. Or if that fails, you can also opt to put in some volunteering that you might be doing. For example, if you're active with your house of worship, or if there's a charity that you are involved in, talk about that. Okay. Jim, thank you for that question. I should have addressed that preemptively because that also always comes up, or some version of that. So I want to talk about job descriptions, how most people read them, right? Do I want to work there? Do I have the skills or qualifications? Is a brand I want to work for, right? Here's how we read it. When recruiters get a requirement from a hiring manager, what usually happens is the recruiter has a conversation with him or her, wants to understand, okay, what in this job description is actually meaningful and relevant, what's nonsense, what's not on here that I need to be looking for. You know, for example, perhaps someone left the organization involuntarily. So in order to replace that person, the hiring manager very likely will have some ideas about, well, here's what I want to do differently when I hire this time. And these are all essential context for the recruiter, so they know as they are looking over resumes or LinkedIn profiles or what have you, what is it I need to focus on? I mean, there is obviously the bare minimum of meeting the necessary skills. For example, I like to pick on project managers, so apologies to PMs. But you know, you need to actually have been a PM to be considered for a job as a PM, right? I mean, that's just the way it works. So, you know, and oftentimes, have you done it inside a PMO or not? You know, and all the various things that relate to that. More importantly, though, after a certain while, it becomes a matter of, can you be a PM effectively in our organization, whatever that means, you know? That's really kind of the thing that recruiters are looking at as they look at resumes and profiles, as they also are evaluating, talking with prospects. And yes, that last bullet, I would like to make sure that everyone sees that. Yeah, recruiters will cheerfully poach from organizations that our hiring manager said, you know what, the people who do X at such and such shop, those are good people to go after. Yeah, we're absolutely going to do that. Honestly, it would be stupid not to. Your customer's telling you exactly how best to do the job. Why would I not listen to that, right? Okay, so here's how recruiters do this using either the basic or recruiter Lite. Okay, we conduct a LinkedIn search, we do a search engine search, and you know we're keying off of the experience that you see in your profile, because if you have done substantially the similar work at a substantially similar organization, then yeah, that's going to be something that that is going to be important to us. But let's talk for a second about 19th century British mathematician George Boole. You can read. he developed a new form of algebra, has his name now, Boolean Algebra, also referred to by recruiters as Boolean Logic, also referred to as recruiters as Boolean Search. And look, it's algebra using different stuff other than plus, minus, multiply, divide. That's really what it is, okay? So the vocabulary of it is very familiar to you because, you know, we all went to high school. So the order of operations and the operators, those are all things that make sense here. But it's really important to understand, if you are using a basic account to recruit, if you're using Recruiter Lite, you're still going to be using Boolean Algebra in order to find people, because LinkedIn supports that. So here's how we look for you. Does everyone remember this acronym? This handy little mnemonic device from whenever you learned algebra, high school or secondary school if you're not from the US. So parentheses, right? Exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So in addition to operators such as multiply, divide, add, subtract, Boole discovered operators and, not, or, and also the quotation mark. And please note, they mean the straight quotation mark, not the curly Q version that Microsoft Office always corrects for you, because it always does this. Many recruiters have been foiled when creating a search string, as it's called, in a Microsoft Office product, and have found that the quotation marks have been substituted, rendering the search string not effective. So here's how these work. So this is really about combining sets. That's all of what Boolean algebra is about. The interaction of sets, combining, excluding, comparing. So the and, the not, the or, those are very straightforward. The parentheses execute the stuff in this before you execute everything else that follows. And yes, just like when you get into more advanced algebra, you can have nested sets of parentheses. Same thing can happen in Boolean algebra because it's still just algebra. And then the quotation marks, exactly this stuff. Whatever's between the quotation marks, give me exactly this. If I am looking for a Volkswagen Rabbit, and that's what I want results specific to the Rabbit model of automobile manufactured by Volkswagen, I'm going to put Volkswagen Rabbit in quotation marks on any search engine because I want to avoid bunnies. That's not what I'm interested in. But now I want to talk about this piece, the X-ray piece. Now, those of you who are familiar with how to conduct searches on the interwebs know that you can put in the site operator, colon, and the precise URL that follows it, and get results only from that particular site. But you don't have to stop at just the main page. You can go deeper. So what this piece here says, www.linkedin.com/in, what that does specifically is not only does it restrict all the results on the search from LinkedIn, but moreover, it's going to give you only the profiles that are in English. Now, if you are working in a different nation, you might perhaps prefer to use a different two-letter ISO language code, because that's what that is, because the LinkedIn development team, being good computer scientists, use ISO standards for their abbreviation. And IN is the one for English. So this is what it can look like. I go to any search engine I like. I personally prefer to use Google. So this is what I would do at the URL space. I put this in, exactly this. You can copy and paste it from the slide when you receive the deck later. So what this search will show you is every project manager or every person who has had the title project manager and the word Amazon appears in a profile somewhere. And then the second bullet, as you can see, goes to Amazon and two of their well-known business units, Audible and Zappos. And then it gets more complex, right? Because and again, it's only showing me only results with the phrase project manager, right? Now what this is going to do is show me profiles for every project manager in each of the FANG firms, and profiles that are situated in either the greater New York City or greater Philadelphia areas. And you could nest the parentheses even further if you really wanted, if you wanted to drill down to try to find people who live in a specific municipality, because LinkedIn profiles do allow you to say, I live specifically in East Brunswick. I live specifically in Morris Plains. I live specifically, in Colts Neck. It allows you to do that. Of course, there is a danger because you can make a string too long. After like 20 or so criteria, it kind of throws up its hands. So you can get a little too in the weeds with this stuff, but basically this is how it would work. Now, this just finds project managers. What if I wanted a project manager who has particular experience in, say, AWS? Well, that's going to be, probably not Alphabet or Google because they have their own platform. Almost certainly it's going to be Amazon or Netflix, Facebook. Big question. Are there any questions on how Boolean algebra works?
There's nothing in the chat right now, but folks, this would be your opportunity to get a little bit of clarity while Ed is on this topic. We'll just give them another moment or two to quickly type the word question or type their question. It's another opportunity for Alex to practice singing Jeopardy music. There's a question from Jim. Do you need to start the Google search with quote site colon quote?
Jim, really good question. The search string does not need to begin with site, no. I prefer to begin my search strings when I do this in that way, because what will happen is I'm never satisfied with the results of the first search. That's always going to be my constant. So when I want to edit my search string, I will edit towards the end of the string rather than have to retype from scratch every time, because honestly, a little lazy. So I like to think of this as an efficiency. But no, there's no reason in the world why you as a job seeker should necessarily follow that same practice.
I guess my question is, in those examples that you gave, do you need the site colon in front of LinkedIn, or can you just put www.linkedin.com, so forth and so on?
I have been doing it in this way for long enough that I actually have never tried dropping off the www piece.
Okay, but to do the search just in LinkedIn, you have to put the word site at the starting.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm talking about doing it on a search engine.
Yeah, so I always use Google, like most people. My question is really, do you have to have the word site in front of the website in order to do it?
Let's find out. And to just be clear, Sam, help me out here. Oh, come on. Seriously? Oh, so frustrating.
Okay.
It's not letting me. I'm having some trouble with my machine right now. I'm sorry. Let me come back to it later.
Okay, so I think what at least I'm seeing from Bruce, you have to use site to restrict it to just the site, LinkedIn.
I feel like I'm not quite understanding what you're asking me right now.
I guess I'm saying is when I put the search in, I don't say, I have to start it off with the word site in order to restrict the search just to LinkedIn.
Well, what I'm talking about is how you would search specifically on LinkedIn. If you remove the site operator, it doesn't know that you want to restrict the result in that way.
Oh, so okay, when I'm in LinkedIn, I use site as one of the operators.
On LinkedIn, it doesn't recognize, I don't believe it uses the site operator because it doesn't go to anywhere other than LinkedIn. So it wouldn't be relevant there.
Okay, so what you're saying is, I'm sorry for this tangent. You have to the site operator, like what you're showing right there, when you're searching in Google. That's the thing.
I'm terribly sorry, Sam. I'm having some trouble hearing you properly.
So
can we perhaps connect afterwards?
Either take it offline, but in summary, site is a Google operator. If you do a Google search in Google search engine, you can use site, and your search will occur in that site. That's the summary. And but yeah, contact Ed offline for more complete discussion.
Thank you.
There are a couple of other questions. We should get to those as well. So great, thanks, Jim.
Thank you, David. You answered my question.
So E has a question also about two distinct professional experiences. And let's say one is in risk and one is in FP&A, and he's interested in, or she is interested in both opportunities. Since there's only one LinkedIn page, how would you present that in a headline?
E, that's a really, really good question. And this is something that comes up, I think, in just about every presentation I've ever delivered. So here's the issue in front of you, E. You have had two different interests, two different careers, but there's some commonality there. There's an overarching story, a narrative that explains why you have done both. You know, you need to figure out what that is and how to articulate it. That is part of your special sauce, your unique value proposition as a professional, because you can speak to both both risk and FP&A. You know, I'm very curious about your background actually, and perhaps we can connect a little bit afterwards. But you know, the issue is that, as you say, your LinkedIn profile it needs to be somewhat targeted. So you have a kind of unique situation in that, you know, you are comfortable in both worlds, and so the solution to that is understand and then articulate what that narrative is, that what explains how you have expertise in both, and that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to the smart recruiter who finds you.
Thank you, Ed. And Sam has a question. Can you recommend a book or a website that provides more user info about Boolean logic for search?
Yep. Hold on. Website, best website I know.
And it's very impressive that you're doing a search in Google to find it.
This is a blog maintained. Oh, hey. Oh, Edge, you charming beast. This right here, Sam.
Okay,
Boolean
got it.
Blackball. This is, in my opinion, the definitive guide on Boolean.
Hey, very helpful. Thank you.
I just put that in chat as well.
Thank you very much, David.
Is there, and Valerie has a question, is there a way not to be found? For example, I have a job title that makes people think I was a data manager when I never was. The only thing that I can think of is to exclude it to stop getting job offers.
Okay, so Valerie, this is a really common problem that people have. Here's the thing. I think we all understand in 2021 that your LinkedIn profile is a branding document. Thus, all the pieces of it must be consistent with your brand. Now, I don't know how many people here have been employed at Morgan Stanley. I have been in the past. And Morgan Stanley formally recognizes only 4 job titles. Associate. The next job title they recognize is vice president. You'll notice that you can't discern a blessed thing about what an associate's responsibilities are. They could be an equity researcher. They could be a market data analyst. You know, doesn't make a difference. But that is formally what your job title is. Don't use the job title your employer gave you. Best example I have. Years ago, I used to work for an employer in the fashion business. And my job title at that time was operations manager. And in that role, what I did was I was liaison between the manufacturing overseas and US-based clients. I was managing the operations of that business. So that was my job title. A couple of years back, I was hiring at another employer, got a resume for a guy, job title, operations manager. He was general manager for a gym. I think it's fair to say that there's very little overlap between the skills and lived experiences of people performing those 2 jobs. Obviously, you're talking with customers. I think the similarities kind of stop there, generally speaking. Don't be shackled by what your employer said you did. John, that is a great question. So John's question, why do you start with Google and not LinkedIn? And John, that is so good. Now, again, I'm talking about the context of a recruiter who is using either LinkedIn basic accounts or LinkedIn Recruiter Lite. The search tools are going to be the same for recruiters using either of those kinds of subscriptions. That's why we're talking about it, because sometimes the ability to search on LinkedIn is not great. So you may have discovered this over your own personal experience. I certainly always have. And so LinkedIn, because Google's a better search engine than what LinkedIn provides natively. At the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. Okay. Let's move on now to the LinkedIn Recruiter product. This is what greets the user of LinkedIn Recruiter when they log in. These are search criteria that they can use. So yeah, you could, and that, by the way, Valerie, is why I don't dig on job titles as criteria to search for. I think it's interesting. I don't know how easy it is to see this. Can people actually read this?
It's a little bit of an eye chart.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you, if you want, you can also increase the size of your screen. On the right side, you see a little camera button with a plus and a minus. You can increase your screen size also.
All right. I zoomed at 100%, or rather to 200%. I'm just gonna have to scroll a little bit here and there, but it's probably more important that you actually see the range of options that that recruiters have. So yeah, we can search by zip code. That's really, really important for us because guess what? A lot of jobs not really remote indefinitely. So yeah, we're going to care where you live. But if you are open for remote, we'd like to know that. It's important, by the way, that I can tell it include these criteria if I say, you know, software developer, for example, or I can exclude that same criteria if I want. So for example, let's say I know I do not want people from such and such employer, right? Heck, I don't want to poach from my own organization. I mean, that would be silly, right? So obviously, I probably don't want to find those folks. I think it's problematic that year of graduation is a selectable criteria, but it's also important for you to know. Level seniority. I'm not going after senior people for entry-level gigs, nor vice versa. And what kind of degree you've got. Now, you would think that we're talking, what? High school diploma, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate. No. It goes as far as what type of bachelor's degree, and a whole mess of stuff. It sets out, it calls out MBAs distinctly from other forms of graduate degrees, et cetera, et cetera. It can be very, very granular. Here's some other stuff that you can ask it for. What language profiles in? As you saw from the Google search I was talking about, I'm only interested in English language profiles because, you know, that's the dominant language in where I recruit. Not sure how useful this criteria is, but it's still useful, I suppose, for some folks. How many years in your current employer? I mean, hey, I don't want to recruit you if you've been there less than a year. I mean, you just got there. Years in your current position, you've been there more than 2 years. You might be thinking about the grass is greener somewhere else. Yeah, I would want to talk with you then. And for those who don't know, hiring veterans is a big deal in recruiting circles. We love veterans, absolutely love veterans, and that's because military veterans know teamwork and logistics better than most people ever will. We love that stuff, absolutely love it. And for those who've been leaders, then yeah, you get the formal training on how to do that instead of trying to learn by experience, which is the way it happens in most organizations. Okay. Going to go back to standard. Let's go with fit. Okay. So here's a couple of search options, right? There's 4 screens of this stuff, so bear with me here. Okay, current employer, past employers. What types of companies? Whoops. If we've ever had a conversation with you, or anyone at my organization has ever had a recruiting conversation with you through LinkedIn, that would be what they're talking about here in recruiting activity. Whatever kind of LinkedIn groups of which you may be a member. Candidate sources, interesting. All right. Maybe I know exactly who, maybe I need a guy named Dave. Well, I could search on that criteria. I can't imagine how that's meaningful or valuable to anybody, but here we go. Field of study. Hey, I want comp sci majors. There you go. Well, wait a second. Penn State has an IST. That's sort of like a comp sci degree. I should probably include it in the criteria here. All right. I can search based on what size employer you've been at. I can search based on whether or not you are a follower of our brand. That's actually rather interesting to us. Job functions, I think, is fairly self-explanatory. And these things relate to specific things within the LinkedIn Recruiter collaboration tools, which would not be relevant for folks today. All right, and hey, Adrian, hide previously viewed. That is a really smart question. If you haven't seen Adrian's question, she was asking about this very specifically. And I'm going to zoom on it so that everyone can see it properly. So this is under the section where it speaks of recruiting activity involving involving people in that search result. So what that means is it will eliminate those people from this specific search, Adrian. That's exactly what it's intended to do. Now, it's kind of unusual to hide Yeah. If so, let's say you have not been neglecting your LinkedIn profile for 5 years, and now you decide that you want to update it. If you have already been viewed by that particular recruiter, or actually any recruiter at that employer, then yeah, you are going to not show up as a consequence, which is a darn shame. If you feel like this may be happening to you, you should probably see if you can't engage a recruiter at that employer in a conversation and circumvent the tool. Okay. So those are the various ways in which recruiters will use LinkedIn Recruiter to try to find people. And now, what do you want me to look for?
So this is your opportunity to put in chat suggestions for Ed to do a search and see how the results come up. We're gonna disconnect George from future meetings. Chief cook and bottle washer. Sorry, George. You'll have to find your own chief cook and bottle washer.
Personal searches.
Yeah. But maybe if you are of a profession and you want to see, might you come up in a search that Ed will do, that may be of interest to you and others. So if you have a suggestion. Yeah, but that's not a search, that's your feed.
Yeah, I know. But since I saw him in a window earlier, yeah. I thought I'd give him a shout out.
And maybe to Adrian's question, can you click the hide button so George doesn't come up anymore?
All right, folks.
So Valerie put in project manager. If you were searching for a project manager, maybe at your employer, okay. Ed, how might you do a search for a project manager?
That is a fabulous question. And one I've really ought to have attended because I knew that you were here, Valerie. Okay, what kind of project manager are we talking about? Are we talking about a construction project manager? Are we talking about an IT project manager? Business process? Yeah, I know, but these are the kinds of questions that I need to ask in order to make sure I'm getting the right results, right? Are we talking about software development, software application projects? Are we talking about infrastructure projects, data centers? You know, these are all really kind of important because this is the level of stuff that hiring managers are seeking. So let's see. All right, so, okay. Let's say I'm looking for a project manager. Sure. And I don't want someone who had been a project manager, but now is a director of PMOs, right? I don't want that person because that person's too senior. I want this person who currently has that job or last did that job. Now, if, let's say I am hiring for a project manager, hang on a sec, where the dickens did it go? Oh, stop that. LinkedIn, you're really honking me off this morning. See, wouldn't you know, here I am trying to make this thing work, and it's just not cooperating with me. Now, let's say I'm looking for a project manager in Princeton. And I want that person to be within 25 miles, because 50 miles puts someone into probably farther away than they want to commute. How many years of experience do I want this person to have? I want that person to be somewhat experienced, but I don't want a 30-year veteran because that person is very likely directing PMOs. Might be too expensive for me. And we're looking for and let's say that's all I really want, right? So I tell it to search. 3 to 10 years experience. It'll take a little while. Let's see if there's some questions I can answer in the meantime. More than Bruce? Sure. BAs, makes sense. Ravi, noted. 4.2 thousand results. So 4,200 results, right? Roughly. Here's what shows up. This is some interesting intelligence, huh? I don't know about you, but I find that rather interesting. Ooh. I think I want to talk with Candace actually at some future point. Interesting. This, by the way, I want to show you this. This is important. The open to work, there's 2 ways that you can tell people on LinkedIn that you are open to work. You need to access them through the settings and privacy section of your profiles. But you can either tell the universe, which is what gives you that photo frame that goes around your profile picture, because we all have profile pictures, right? Right? Or you can tell just recruiters, and that's what this means. So when you see people open to work, that's what they're talking about when it says just recruiters. So as you can see, here are the search results. All matter of different industries. Shocking, you know, someone in the New York City area who's in pharma and is PM. So that's what that looks like, Valerie. Does that get you where you were wanting to be, Valerie?
Yes, I'm just curious how it works.
Okay.
So, yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, Bruce, you had the next question. Well, let's talk about that. Hold on, business analyst. Let's do that thing. Come on, LinkedIn. Sometime today would be nice. I feel like LinkedIn should just play the girl from Ipanema when this happens. Maybe that's just me.
Maybe that popcorn music.
Yeah. Oof. There we go. I really don't know why LinkedIn is performing so poorly this morning. It's normally a lot better than this. Like a lot better. Like I've not witnessed it do this before. Okay, 6,700 results. And you'll notice I've actually never changed that criteria from the search I just did on PMs. So I'm still looking at implementation or development. So there we go. Now, odds are good that I probably will also want to put in something like UAT or business requirements gathering, right? Or stuff like that. Because, you know, it's a BA, that's... Pardon?
PMP?
I suppose we could. Yeah, that's certainly a criteria that would be interesting to see. Let's find out. And now here, I'm going to use the parentheses because I want to make sure I'm capturing both these things. You'll notice I always put the operators in caps for anything that's an alpha character, and the reason I do that is actually just ease of reading, because otherwise it's a very long undifferentiated string of text. So it makes it easier for me to see where I need to make changes if I don't get the results I'm looking for. And look at that, 807 results now. That's pretty impressive.
Because that's a business analyst who's a PMP, not a project manager.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
More specific.
Yeah, that's a much smaller universe, as you can see. But still, a lot of them within 25 miles of Princeton, interestingly.
Can you put in something like with farmer experience?
I can do better than that. I can put in industry, pharmaceutical.
Okay.
Now, where'd it go? Here we go. Yeah, pharmaceuticals. Boom. Goes from 807 to any day now, guys.
Right.
Alrighty.
55.
So less than 10% of that universe is PMP certified.
So shouldn't
but I'm capturing current or past.
Yeah.
So if I only do current, six people. 6 of that current title.
And this includes available for work.
It includes everyone, whether or not they have said that they are open to work. Everyone.
No, I mean, in the return, you said they had to be available for work.
I am not actually currently using that parameter on the search.
Okay. I mean, one of the things you said before, Ed, is that you're very busy. How many actual jobs are you working on right now?
27.
27. Woo.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, that's nothing.
Yeah.
I've got a colleague who's got between 55 and 60 right now.
Well,
so
do you have any, from your side of the table, do you have any perception about how many can you work on effectively at a time?
See, you know, the problem in answering that question is that not all recs are equally difficult.
Right.
Some are very, very labor intensive. I conducted a search for a director last year that went, I think, 9 months. But yeah,
Ed, this is Frank. Also, you know, effectively is a subjective term.
Yep.
To me, if you asked me how many jobs Ed could work on simultaneously effectively, I would want to see the end result of how many of the candidates that were selected, how did they perform, how long did they last. To me, that would be the measure of effectiveness.
Here, seconded.
So,
Somebody want to be
Yeah.
fed?
Yeah, someone just wants a little attention. Sweetie, say hi to everybody. Oh, you being shy? All right.
Ed, at one point in time, you said you were so busy you didn't read cover letters. Is that still the case?
That's absolutely still the case. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, the resume is going to tell me whether or not you can or cannot do the job as far as the hiring manager is concerned. It's got to be on the resume. If it is not on the resume, I, as a recruiter, do not care what's in the cover letter, because the resume tells me whether or not you are highly qualified.
Okay, so we all have to remember that recruiters are people too. And, different people have different paradigms. So
Yep.
that's why from the beginning with the Breakfast Club, what we've told everybody to do is take your cover letter, your resume and all, and edit, copy, paste it right into the body of the email, and then also include them as attachments. Because some people are deathly afraid to open up email attachments from people that they don't know, because they don't want to risk taking down their device with a virus. So, you have to think of all the different ways that, the person you're trying to communicate and get your message across to may behave upon receiving your communication. So that's why we recommend a cover letter, a resume, and a T letter. So, you're giving them the option to look at all or any of it to determine if you're a match. And then again, edit, copy, paste them into the body of the email as well as an attachment.
Thanks, Frank. P. I see a question from Alex. So the question from Alex is how to find who is or are recruiters for a particular employer. So that is actually very challenging when you're speaking of external recruiters. Like Janelle Rosino, of course, who's well known to most of you, is an external recruiter. And something she's been doing with great success for a long time. But you won't know who she's working with unless you ask her.
Well, Ed, there is one way to reverse engineer it. Go through a site like Indeed, look for that employer who's posting the jobs, and many times you'll see the external recruiter that's requesting you to reply to them. And sometimes the external recruiters also have client lists posted on their website.
True.
Almost as a way of validating their competency and their abilities.
This is true. This is true. But if you're talking about an internal recruiter, that should be fairly straightforward, right? So hold on a second. I want to go back to the demo piece because Robbie was looking for something very specific. Okay. Oracle ERP Applications Manager. So let's try Applications Manager. Come on. Application Manager, sure. We can go with that. Let's go with current. And instead of pharma, and I'm going to drop out, we're going to edit the text here. there's another name for isn't there a particular name for the Oracle ERP suite? I feel like there is, but it's not coming to me.
There's
now.
multiple names. There's PeopleSoft. There's JD Edwards.
Yeah, that's what I
they
thought.
have probably about 6 of them at Oracle.
I put on the chat, it is e-business suite, e-business suite.
Okay, so e-business suite for specifically then. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Okay, application manager, e-business suite. Okay, gonna run that search now.
E-iPhone.
I think the hyphen is generally not read. It's omitted in searches usually. But you know what? Just to be clear, let's try this. Okay. So it actually does care about the hyphen, so that's good to know. There you go, Ravi.
My profile is not showing up. What could be the reason? Should I add some words in the headline?
So Ravi, if your job title is not application manager, that's going to be why. If it is, then I couldn't begin to guess why. It could, in theory, there could be a typo somewhere that's preventing it from meeting this criteria. I find that extremely improbable, but the search is also restricted to 25 miles of Princeton, so that might also be why. Let's find out. Okay. John, your question was, are you giving informational interviews? Yeah. I have a standing call with one person, as a matter of fact, every Tuesday late morning. And I usually do 2 or 3 in a given week. Robbie, there you go. Now, that's globally, but there's 700 plus.
I did just pull up Robbie's profile, and he says he's in the greater New York area. I don't know more about his profile, so maybe that might be outside of Princeton.
Yeah, that could be Connecticut, right?
And
Northern New Jersey.
His northern New Jersey is more than 25 miles.
Okay.
Yep. So if you're like Essex or Morris or parts north of that, then that's probably why you didn't show up in those results, Robbie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think there are a couple more questions. I did step away for a moment. Did you get to Carol's question about do recruiters use LinkedIn add-ons like crystalknows.com?
I missed that question. I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with Crystal Knows. I'm sure some recruiters do. There are a couple that I actually use periodically, just because they make fine-tuning my search results a little bit easier. But I'm not familiar with Crystal Knows. I'm not aware of one that does disk analyses. Really interesting question. Like I said, there's many recruiters, so I imagine that some must, but I don't believe it's a standard or especially common practice.
Yeah, it's actually an accredited platform that anybody can go through your LinkedIn profile and it runs a disk analysis on it. If you have done the disk analysis on you, it then tells you how you can best communicate with the other person. And the Crystal Knows website has videos on how hiring managers can profile their organizations. So for example, if a business analyst is X and you're not an X, you're gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carol. I think I saw another question from Jim.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I've got
Yeah,
it
okay,
here.
so.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm planning on updating my LinkedIn profile over a few days. Will all my connections be contacted every time I make a change? What's the best setting to use so that I don't bombard my connections with notifications? Jim, that is a very smart question. Thank you very much for asking it. I appreciate it. So let's talk about that, shall we? Hang on for just a sec. There we go. Here's what you do. I'm only showing you from desktop because honestly, I can't transmit my app very effectively in this medium. So you go here, you click on your smiling face because it's smiling, right? Go to settings and privacy. Now I know LinkedIn makes it not especially easy to find and navigate. I'm aware. This is a known issue. Navigate to visibility. Here you go. Visibility of your LinkedIn activity. Share profile updates with your network. I've had this turned off for about 8 years now. I never, ever, ever do that. Because now that's a personal choice on my part. But for you, Jim, go in, set a calendar date for 1 week in the future to remind yourself to turn it back on once you are done making your updates. That is probably going to be the best way to go about this, right?
Okay, thank you. And there's another question a little further down from Valerie. How does IN, which I guess is LinkedIn, calculate years of experience given it's not always in the job title? Does it use both the title and the description?
Valerie, really, really astute question, as I know to expect from you. So the short answer is, if it's not in the job title, it doesn't know. There's not a lot in terms of what it can reasonably infer, because it just doesn't have the information. So that's just a thing that unfortunately can happen. It's fuzzy. So experienced recruiters who are familiar with LinkedIn Recruiter understand how it works, know not to trust 100% when we ask these things. But certainly, I gotta restrict my search results in some way, and that's ultimately the way that one way that I have chosen to do so. And again, that's another opportunity to not be shackled by what your employer said you were doing.
Okay, thanks, Ed. And I think that's all the questions I saw. If I missed any, I apologize. So maybe a good time to summarize and wrap up the presentation. We got some good examples of using the LinkedIn Recruiter. So I guess we'll just quickly move on.
All right, so this morning, we spoke about a couple of things: the kinds of recruiters that are out there, the resources that recruiters have in order to do the job, and how all kinds of recruiters, whatever However, we are funded and supplied by our employers to do the job, whether we're using the free account or whether we're using, the Cohiba of all LinkedIn products, LinkedIn Recruiter. Thank you, everyone, for your attention this morning. I really appreciate it.
Well, Ed, thank you very much. This is time for a couple of more questions, and then before we officially end the meeting, or when we officially end the meeting, we'll keep this GoToMeeting session open without the recording, and we could just hang around the meeting room, much like if we were at the Days Inn hanging around a little to catch up. But there's another question from E, and E, I don't know if that's your whole name, but that's what's posted. For a job, I imagine you get 1, the ATS, 2, LinkedIn search, and 3, referral. Which ones do recruiters use to hire the most?
The fact of the matter is, you have almost certainly, if you swap LinkedIn and referral, you have the order in which by volume of how each of those sources gets used in order to hire. It depends on the employer or agency in question. Especially for well-established employers, where they have been in place for 10, 20, more years. Over the years, they will have accumulated more resumes from more applicants over that time. A really good ATS will allow you to search through the resumes for particular skill sets or keywords in order to find previous applicants, and if they're interested, well, you know how to get hold of them. Not all ATSs are good at this, unfortunately. We absolutely love referrals. It is extremely rare that a referral does not at least get a conversation with a recruiter in corporate recruiting. Unless the referrer has a reputation for not being very selective when they refer somebody, then that's a separate animal.
Good news.
But in terms of LinkedIn and other forms of sourcing, as it's called, that is, look, recruiters love to look for talent if it's something they reasonably believe is out there. I just got a rec yesterday, as a matter of fact, predictably on Friday the 13th, for a very, very challenging skill set. But, what are you going to do? So, yeah, I'm going to have to go look for that talent. That talent doesn't exist within our four walls, does not exist very commonly in the Northeast, frankly. Last time I did this search back in February and March, I saw 3 people within a 100-mile radius who have that skill. But sometimes that's what you got to do.
So in this remote world, the geographic limitation seems almost self-imposed. I mean, by default, you would be, if these positions are remote, you'd be searching for the whole darn country, right?
Well, one would think that. The complication, however, is that for my organization at least, we are expecting to return to hybrid, and we do want some measure of on-site presence. For that reason, it makes it very difficult for me to consider candidates who are not in the geographic area where we are located. We are not we only function in a handful of states. Now, other firms that have a presence across all time zones, for example, good representation across your major metropolitan areas, different ballgame for them. They can probably be talking about, well, okay, listen, why don't you, okay, so you're in Maine. All right, well, we actually have, how would you feel about relocating to, say, Vermont, because, we actually have an office in Montpelier. That might be something that works. But a lot of employers do want to return, at least in some measure, to on-site. I beg your pardon, sorry. So that is a bit of a challenge.
Bummer. I should keep in mind which jobs are open to remote work full time, because I mean, in the choice between any amount of office and full remote, I'm somewhere in the heck no, I won't go, and you'll never take me alive.
Okay.
Okay. And, you know, one of the challenges there is that not every organization can support that model, which is unfortunate. But mine doesn't right now. I'm not sure that we ever will. Other firms, however, are absolutely fine with it. Heck, didn't Twitter announce last summer that, you know what, we're just going to not have physical offices, or at least not require on-site ever again, right? I think they're the first major firm to make that announcement, and then a couple others have followed suit subsequently.
Of all employers, LinkedIn did as well.
Yeah.
Wait, what did you say?
LinkedIn has gone to full remote.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The other thing you need to consider when companies go full remote, and if you're in one part of the country and you feel that's easy to work in another part of the country, it does open up the competition, because now you're not just competing with the people in your geographic region. Let's say like Ed was looking for 25 miles. Imagine if Ed was searching for 2,500 miles. So there's a lot more competition. So it's a double-edged sword. Just be careful. You may be more successful if you're able to relocate and you're the ideal candidate. Just keep food for thought.
Is actually going to be cutting people's salaries working remotely too. Something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, don't work for Google.
Yeah, but other companies will follow suit.
So Ed, there's another question here, because we'll wrap up soon. This is from Jim. Can you put coursework such as Udemy and Coursera or studying for certifications as your current position if you're in a transition?
You should definitely put it to show that you're a continuous learner.
The question is for a current position. So you're not a consultant, you're not employed with the ABC company, you are...
Your education section is separate from your work experience.
Right. No, but I think I understand exactly what the person is asking. David, thank you for drawing attention to that one. So the question is, well, how do I fill the current position? Can I use a student, for example?
Right, exactly.
Okay, yeah, got it.
But again, as an employer that looks at this stuff all day long, you have an education section. If it shows that you went and you're going to school and you say, I'm not working while I'm going to school, that you wouldn't go and put something under your work experience to say, I'm currently, attending courses.
Well, right, but the question is, you have to have something in your current position, or else the recruiters aren't going to look at you. So is that an option to put that you're working towards a certification or something like that?
So Jim, this is a really, really good question. As Frank said, this isn't entirely the way that it's intended to use, but we're talking about gaming the system here, right? But I also want to point out something. Every recruiter out there with two neurons rubbed together knows what's been happening in the world since April of last year, okay? So the fact that people have been in search is not exactly surprising. Now, speaking strictly about your LinkedIn profile, and I'm assuming this is the context within which you are asking the question.
Right.
I am not a fan of this, and my reason for saying that is essentially what Frank had said. It's not really a work experience that you're talking about here. I personally would advocate instead talking about a personal sabbatical, because that's really what you're doing. That's what a sabbatical is for, right? Self-education. And I've seen a lot of situations where that is actually true, right? Whether it's because you're now the primary caregiver to somebody in your life, right? Or you're managing some kind of a medical or health concern, I spoke with one person who has been out for 6 years because a parent was ill, and dealing with the estate and probate type things, just a whole mess for that person. And that was only last week.
Well, luckily, this isn't my current situation, but let's say you get laid off. Do you say, if you're getting severance, do you say you're still with the company? Or, I mean, I want to be honest, but I also don't want to be eliminated because I got laid off.
Right. So here's what I would say. Number one, begin volunteering somewhere. Someone could use your time. It'll be good for you and good for the people in your community. B, consider using that as a current position. C, are you open to doing contracting work? If you are, great. That is also an option that is very popular. Now, if you don't want to say any of these things, then unfortunately that really doesn't give you anywhere to go.
There is one other option. Go into one of the gig platforms that I previously talked about. Get yourself a profile on it and start performing gigs.
No.
You'll be making money, and you'll be you could use that as your current employment.
Well, could you call yourself an independent contractor if you're looking for contract work?
That's exactly what consulting is.
The context of the question really is LinkedIn penalizes profiles that don't have a current position. Your recent position with an end date,
right,
if you left the company 2 months ago, is not a current position, it's a recent position. A current position does not have an end date. It might say you started in 2018 to present. And so you want to have a current position because LinkedIn considers a 100% complete profile when you do have a current position. And so some of the suggestions that Ed and Frank gave are a way to give a legitimate working current position. So call yourself an independent consultant or put yourself on one of the gig platforms. And by the way, I did post those gig platforms in chat to everybody at 9:29. You can go back and take a look at those. So thanks, Frank, for sharing. And Adrian has that as well, so she'll post that. All right. Well, I think we've reached the end point of the formality of the meeting. So Ed, thank you so much for being a continued supporter of job seekers. I know that goes without saying, but I'm saying it anyway. And but you are such a friend to all job seekers and have a tremendous amount of knowledge to share. I'm glad that you continue to do so. So thank you so much. Appreciate everybody's time for being here today. And Frank, are there any closing comments you would like to make before we officially wrap up?
David, just that, that comment that individual gave, who was the head of the SAI, when he talked about the gig platforms, was really quite telling. There are so many different ways to engage, when you're out of work by going into this new gig economy, that really no one should be unemployed. You may be underemployed, you may not be fully employed, but please take advantage of all these gig platforms and become employed to some level. And then that, I think, will be a big help to many of you, because you never know where that's going to lead you. Even if you get engaged, even big firms like PwC have a huge thing called talent exchange, where they're actually tasking their management and leadership that they have to fulfill a certain percentage of all the work that they do with contingent workers. So this is a great change in the industry to help everybody who's out there looking for work, and I would take full advantage of it.
Frank, are there one or two that you would especially recommend, or are they all?
It depends on the nature of what your profession, level, and occupation is.
Okay.
Look through them and get those that match up to your skill sets and what you're looking for the best. Somebody may want total flexibility so that they could be available when they're doing interviews, so they may choose to go a different route. It doesn't have to match up with, what your normal job is. It's just about getting you some money in your pocket and giving you employment while you're, managing your primary search. We always said there should be a plan A and a plan B. And with this gig economy, it gives you a whole nother outlet now for plan B possibilities.